Hello again. Glad you're on board. Happy to be seen by you. I'd like to say happy to see you, but can't do that yet. And I hope you are into the holy days, more than the holidays, shall we say. And that's why we're here today, to help you see the holy in the holiday. First of all, I'd like to make an announcement or two. This Sunday, which is the 18th, Saturday, the 17th, this coming Saturday, around 6:15, after our 4 o'clock Mass, we're going to have like a spaghetti dinner, and then we're going to have the choir and children do a concert for us, a little play. So you're all welcome to come. We'd love to have you come. Roughly, if you're avoiding eating, you don't want the dinner, at least to be there by, say, about 6:15. Anyway, in the church, okay? Hope we see you there. Invite the neighbors. And I wanted to make sure you're aware of our Christmas Mass schedule. We have a 4 o'clock children's Mass on Christmas Eve. We're going to try a 6 o'clock p.m. Mass. It's hard on some of the staff, that's for sure, and the ushers. But between the 4 and our late Mass, we're going to try a 6 o'clock and see if it's a needed Mass. If it works, we'll do it again next year. Then we have a choir presentation for Christmas on Christmas Eve at 10 o'clock, and then 10:30 is our midnight Mass, and we have one Mass on Christmas Day at 10 o'clock. Okay, so again, invite family and friends. We'd love to see you, and tell us when you're visiting. I have a wonderful story to share with you. Now, if you get the Reader's Digest, you probably read it already. But the January 23 issue has a story in it about real live elves. By the way, I don't know if I shared this with you. What do you call Santa's little helpers? Subordinate clauses? Okay. Well, these are not the elves we're talking about. I really am sort of talking about the elf on a shelf, but more than that. For years, Jessie the elf on a shelf had been a holiday figure, or as you and I appreciate saying, a holy day, a Christmas Day figure, in the classroom of a woman by the name of Jessie Levinson, and she always put the elf up after Thanksgiving to show the kids and to encourage the kids that gift giving is a wonderful thing. Whatever they could do for each other, showing each other kindness. This was actually her pre-K class, mind you. Excuse me. And she came to realize, being a veteran teacher there in LA County, in San Fernando Elementary School, as a matter of fact, she came to understand, realize that her kids truly lived in a disadvantaged neighborhood, although they were surrounded by wealth, very wealthy community. Excuse me, but she knew that her young students had it really tough. Some of them were homeless. Some of them actually were living in cars. Others lived, some in a one-room place with 8 or 10 people occupying that room. Anyway, the poverty was terrible in this area. You think of LA, you don't think of that kind of poverty. Well, that's why the elf on the shelf meant a great deal to them during this season. There was, hope and childlike, excitement. Because Mrs. Levinson had done this every year. So they were expecting the elf. Now, It was hard for her to do on a teacher's salary, but she tried every day between Thanksgiving and Christmas break to give each of her 23 kids a little gift every day. It might have been a pencil, it might have been a box of crayons, but pre-K kids, and they were children, of course, were very excited about those gifts and very appreciative of them. Small things that some of their parents could not even give them that around the holidays. So since the school was surrounded by these wealthy neighbors, it was such a stark contrast to see these poor kids coming to school and on rainy days. And rainy days in Southern California can be cold, of course, in the winter. Well, I mean in the 40s, and for them that's cold. The kids on rainy days would come covered in trash bags. That was their clothing, their protection against the elements, so to speak. Some of these kids, not only did they not have a coat or raincoat of any sort, some of them didn't even have a toothbrush, the teacher would come to find out. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, as it hit us all. And the school district, as many school districts did, switched to online learning. And Zoom opened the eyes of the teachers in this San Fernando Valley school. They were able to see into their children's living spaces. One of the kids lived in back of a small, like a carry-out food store during the day. That's where she kept herself out of the sight of, the authorities. But could work her Zoom, I guess, with whatever the business had their computer for her to work on. There were a lot of physical hardships so that the teachers realized these kids were facing, and the teachers were absolutely stunned. Some of the kids, of course, really broke the teachers' hearts with where they were staying. And that's where they would see multiple kids sharing one bed, for instance. They would see how unattended the room was where they were staying. Or I don't know how some of these kids could do Zooming because they couldn't afford these computers, but apparently they had access somehow or another to the schooling. But at any rate, that peek into these kids' homes for the teachers was a peek. It motivated this Stephanie Levinson, the teacher of the pre-Ks, to say, listen, all these common complaints that we're hearing, the kids would say, of course, they were cold. And again, in California, when the weather's in the 40s and you don't have heat, that's cold. So that was a common complaint. They said the little fingers were cold. And so Levinson said, I had to do something more for the kids. So she knew that she couldn't afford to do something on her own teacher salary any more than she had been doing. So how is she going to keep all of her kids warm? This was a challenge that she picked up. She created a simple wish list on Amazon this past Christmas. She asked for a blanket for each one of her pre-K kids, just to stave off the cold. And there's an app called Nextdoor, and on that Nextdoor app, she made a really heartfelt plea for the kids, to the residents of the well-heeled neighborhood, to bring in more stuff to keep her kids warm and bundled, parkas, at least hoodies and scarves and gloves and so on. So she put out quite a wish list, and She hoped for the best. 5 minutes later, she got a text from a neighbor who said, listen, I want to give to your cause, but there's nothing on there. In 5 minutes, all the items were taken care of. And so she drew up a bigger list. She reopened the Amazon page, and in 5 more minutes, with a bigger list, once again, all gone. The surrounding community, they were writing or trying to text her and saying, we want to give, but we don't know what to give. There's nothing on the list. So she went to the other pre-K class. It was another about the same size as hers. And she asked the teacher if it was okay if she added that class to her list. She did. Once again, just as quickly, the second class was showered with blankets and with warm weather clothing. And people saying, we want to buy, we want to help, but there's nothing listed. So she ended up going to the entire school. They had 600 and some students, 618 students. And she made out a list again. This time it included the hoodies for the kids, the scarves, mittens, and umbrellas, and of course, school supplies. Her plea went viral, and so people from California to Texas to Pennsylvania were sending in gifts. They were willing to provide. So I imagine, of course, that she's going to do this same thing this year. But each of the schools, 600 and some students, received for Christmas a backpack filled with Christmas stuff. And then this became such an amazing thing in outreach that she put out a similar list for the beginning of the school year, this beginning of this past school year. She made up a list of school supplies. Parents couldn't afford school supplies. A lot of you are having difficulty supplying your kids with these things. She made out the list, and once again, a backpack for every one of those 600 kids. There was no room in her apartment anymore to keep the gifts that were rolling in. They managed to stack both Christmas and summer gifts in the school library, which became unusable for a couple of months out of the year. And parents would stop by and pick up these gifts in tears. They said, well, whom do we thank, you know? And all the way along the line, Stephanie would tell her kids it was Jessie the elf who was providing for them, because Jessie really appreciated how kind they were to each other, how good they were to each other. And she said these kids were just marvelous. If they, when they received a gift, they would say, can I share this with my sibling, you know, with one of my brothers or sisters? Or she said if one of the kids was crying one morning for one reason or another, these little kids would hug one another and give each other comfort because they thought they were pleasing Jessie the elf, which of course, in a sense, they were. Now we all know that Jessie goes back to 1,000 years, to the birth of a disadvantaged baby in Bethlehem. Jessie is just another name for Jesus, of course. And we find that the Jesus of 2,000 years ago, in guise of the Jessie today, moves the hearts of people from kids on. And people that we often envision, being so difficult today, being so snarky, being so ugly, are really good-hearted. People are good-hearted, but they have to be encouraged in that good-heartedness. Jesus truly does live today. I have to share one little story with you to conclude, and that is There was a big contest among chefs of the world to make the best eggs Benedict possible. The difficult part of that particular dish, of course, is the sauce. So, come to discover, the very, very best sauce for eggs Benedict was made by a chef in Upper Alaska. Hence, we have the song, "There's no place like Nome for the hollandaise." Bye.